Saturday before one of the biggest games the Packers have played, which sounds crazy to say considering they're playing a 3-12-1 team. Well, we hope they end up 3-12-1. The Packers are taking on the Detroit Lions tomorrow with a chance. A win at minimum locks up a bye. If Seattle wins at the Sunday night after Green Bay wins, they will be the number one seed and not have to leave Lambeau Field. I don't want to go over the scenarios if they lose because, frankly, I don't want to think of a world where Green Bay loses to Detroit and blows an opportunity like this one. So I'm your host today. I am Jacob Westendorf. We're going to go over Packers and Lions. I'm here with Jason Perrone. We talked a little before Christmas. And Jason, it appears Zadarius Smith and company, like we mentioned, left a early Christmas present for us in the building. So that was nice to be NFC North champions, but more work to do this week.
Yeah, definitely more work to be done. But I think all the signs point to, and I'm Mr. History Matters, and all these times that the Packers haven't taken advantage of this particular situation, but too many things have fallen into place. And Aaron Rodgers and this team, it's different this year. They're not screwing it up in Motown. And frankly, the Packers, as much as everybody wants to say, got very lucky in 2015 with the Hail Mary, they're due at Ford Field. So it's time to send Matty Pa home crying in his beer.
Yeah, here's hoping that is the case. Green Bay has a noon kickoff tomorrow in Detroit, place they, like we mentioned, when they ran the table in 2016, they played well there. They really haven't played well there in quite some time other than that. So tomorrow's the time to buck the trend. We got some news items before we get into the game. So the first bit of news, Lucas Patrick signed a 2-year extension, keeping him in Green Bay for the next couple of years. Money-wise, not a big deal because immediately the first thought is that their plan for Brian Bulaga? Are they going to kick Billy Turner out to tackle and go cheap at guard and let Lucas Patrick play there? Based on his salary, it looks like that is not going to be the case, but there's a lot of offseason, obviously, eventually, once the Packers win the Super Bowl to discuss all of those things. So I'm not surprised, I guess, by that extension. My first thought was like, really? Okay, that's interesting. And then I saw the money and was like, okay, it makes sense. Good interior offensive lineman. It appears the Packers are emphasizing the depth along their offensive line in a way that they haven't in quite some time. Jason, I think that's nothing but positive just because it's hard. I've often said it's hard to have depth on the offensive line, but that doesn't mean you need to line up with Josh Walker and Don Barclay as your backup offensive lineman either. So they have a good interior offensive lineman. He can play both guard positions. He can play center. You probably don't want him to play tackle under any circumstance, but those are valuable guys to have. Evan Dietrich Smith was a valuable player, for example, when he could do those things. He ended up moving on and playing elsewhere, but the Packers, he had some value to them when guys like Josh Sitton or TJ Lang or even Corey Linsley got banged up. Patrick's played well in some spot duty. To me, a very simple decision to keep him around.
Yeah, J.C. Tretter's another example. And guys that are versatile like that are valuable, absolutely. Lucas Patrick has proven that in a pinch he can step in. You don't need him to do anything more than that, and they also probably got, I don't remember what the terms were, but they were very, 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 very low. So in order to secure a guy that knows the offense, is successful in it, it was a good move, no-brainer. And I think by doing this now, I think the Packers were able to probably maybe convert some of that onto this year's cap. I'm not sure. I think the deadline was at some point today. They may or may not have reached that. It may not have had anything to do with that at all. But I'm fine with it. I like it. It gives them more flexibility, like you said. It's a guy that's been able to step in and do some pretty good things. The Packers have been pretty fortunate this year with health that they haven't had to rely on him very much. But, Lucas Patrick just one of a couple of money moves that the Packers have made over the past couple of days. So I don't hate it at all.
That in the business is called a tease. And yes, we will get to that here momentarily as well. The other thing, roster transaction-wise, the Packers have released Tony Brown, cornerback. He got some starts early in the year. He's been a healthy scratch. Frankly, a disaster on special teams. So that was something that I guess was surprising. But it's not like the Packers are... He had fallen behind the likes of Josh Jacks. He was just above Kadar Hallman. Just not a lot of value on the defense. And if you're not playing well on special teams, he's tough. He's physical. He does some good things on the field, certainly. But I mean, the freak out today, and I'm using that term a little loosely, but the freak out today on social media was kind of funny. You'd have thought that the Packers just cut prime Darrelle Revis or somebody like that with the way they cut him. Because, I mean, I think here's kind of what happens. Brown showed well early in the year. There's no doubt about that. He played well in some spot duty early in the year, and then he kind of fell off. Kevin King stayed healthy. Tramon Williams has been healthy. Jair hasn't missed a lot of games. I should knock on wood before the Packers play a regular season finale tomorrow, keeping those guys healthy for the playoffs. But then Brown kind of just falls to the back. And in the fans, my mind, what's fresh in our mind is, he played well against Chicago. He did some good stuff in the preseason, and now he's not doing that. So there are no negative memories for that player. Whereas with someone else like Will Redmond, for example, has played some extended snaps and spot duty and things of that nature. So Jason's giving me the thumbs up because the Buckeyes have just fallen behind in the college football playoff.
I'm on delay. I knew it too. I'm surprised you kept your act together, man. That's awesome.
Do what I can. I will say this. I don't necessarily care who wins the college football playoff as long as it ain't the Buckeyes. That's
right.
The world against Ohio State. So go Tigers. That's the way that is. But anyways, Will Redmond, somebody who's played like some extended snaps. He's done some good things, but the bad stuff sticks in our head because there's more snaps, so there's more chance for him to do that. So that's kind of what my thought process was. I don't know releasing him the night before the game on the last game of the season led me to believe maybe there's a roster move coming. The Packers will only have one running back that they've used from the offensive standpoint this year. We'll see this, but I don't know. And, Jason, you asked me, is it Raven Green? I don't know. I think that the Packers have something in mind. I don't know what it is. Maybe, and I don't want to speculate on what the case may be with Brown if he made a mistake or something like that either, because that's not fair to him. So I'm not 100% sure what the reason is, but I do know from an on-the-field standpoint, it's not a big loss from the Packers' perspective. So any thoughts on Brown before we transition to some of the other stuff?
A couple. So the first one is if they're releasing Tony Brown, that can only mean that the corners in front of him are healthy, which is good to know. Obviously, Kevin King, Jair Alexander, Tramon Williams all played last week. No reason to think that they had an injury that was going to linger or that was hampering them. They didn't leave the game. They finished the game. But that we have the top three preferred corners available and healthy is a good sign. For them to let Tony Brown go means they're very confident those guys are good to go. Obviously, anything can happen at any given time, but they feel like they're strong enough at the position. The other thing is, Tony Brown actually, he blocked a point in PAT this year. He made some plays. He also, remember the game in Detroit last year where he had a unsportsmanlike conduct penalties.
I was there. He had one in back-to-back weeks or something like that too.
Plays with a lot of fire, and sometimes you have to give and take with guys like that. I don't think that was enough for him to not be on this roster or have anything to do with him being let go because he's been on this team for over a year since, and he hasn't had any of those problems. I think to me, if I'm speculating, it's probably maybe a health situation because he had been dinged up a little bit and scratched over the past couple weeks. The other thing with this whole comparing him to Darrelle Revis thing, I think Packers fans, I say we collectively because I'm trying to not to alienate anybody here. Because I'm trying to stop doing this myself, is we kind of have our guys that we like for whatever reason. They went to our college. We like how they play. We identify with them. We're an underdog. They're an underdog. We love how he gets fired up, and damn it, we need more of that on this team. Whatever your reason be. And then from that point forward, when we make what we call the emotional connection to the player, it's kind of like when you start liking a guy or a girl, and all of a sudden they go up on this pedestal in your mind, and they, their faults get overlooked and all this other kind of stuff. Sorry, I bumped the microphone. That was me. We just we overvalue them. We add points to the scale that don't need to be there. So just remember, Tony Brown was an undrafted free agent. He was an undrafted free agent for a reason. Yeah, that doesn't mean that he can't go somewhere else and be effective. It doesn't mean the Packers won't try to put him on the practice squad.
And it doesn't mean he was ineffective necessarily in Green Bay either. It's just, if you start going down the corners list, Jair Alexander, Kevin King, Tramon Williams, Chandon Sullivan. Joshua Jackson, Will Redmond was playing above him when he was healthy. The Packers have dudes And frankly, Tony Brown's just a guy, and that's no disrespect to Tony Brown. Just a guys have values on teams, but they're also replaceable, and I think that's ultimately what happened. So that's the
Well,
case.
the other thing I would say too is let's not forget we're moving into a different phase of the season that we have not been able to enjoy for the past 2 seasons. They have to have the best players on the field. Jake, you mentioned briefly the running back position. I want to remind everybody Tyler Irvin could potentially be another running back in this offense. So yeah, everybody's like, oh, they're gonna have to call Dexter Williams up. And they probably will dress Dexter Williams tomorrow, but I don't necessarily know if he's going to play ahead of Tyler Irvin, who did get snaps in the backfield last week against the Vikings.
Yeah, I'm curious how they're going to do that. Actually, we'll get to that here in a minute because we have one more bit of news before I jump into the actual game, and that is that the Packers did some finagling with Aaron Rodgers' contract, and it essentially gives them about $11 million in salary cap space. You figure some cuts coming with Jimmy Graham at the end of the season, whenever that is, preferably early February. Lane Taylor slated to make about $5 million. He'll probably get released too. That's one that maybe they keep him around, but that's a discussion for another day. And that gives the Packers, I've seen a lot of different numbers. Essentially, here's the way I look at it, is that Green Bay, if they want to sign another Zadarius Smith type player, they can. If they want to sign a couple of Adrian Amos type players, not quite that tier, but some of your tier 1.5 free agents, they can. Who those will be, I think those conversations are tough to have. I understand speculation; those things are fun. It's a fun discussion of who could be on the team next year or what could fill some holes here or there. I like just as much as anybody thinking about the idea of Amari Cooper playing in Green Bay. But it's also a very good possibility that the Cowboys, I forgot what team he played for a second, franchise tag him, get a deal done, whatever. And I always say that, it's really kind of a fruitless discussion to talk about what free agents you want on your team until after that franchise tag deadline, because that's when like this guy won't be available. Or, there are some guys like D Ford, for example, last year was tagged with the intention of the Chiefs trading him. And that's a possibility for another Chiefs player I found out, and that's Chris Jones. And God in heaven, if Chris Jones lined up next to Kenny Clark on the defensive line, I would love every minute of it. But beside the point, but a bit of news to go in. Essentially what they did is they convert Aaron Rodgers' salary to a signing bonus. It gives them more cap space. It should put to bed any rumors that the Packers want to replace the quarterback at the end of the season, which is always a stupid discussion, but that's where we're at. So not much to say on that regard because there's just not a whole lot to know, but they have the cap space. If they want to sign guys, they can. If they want to roll that over and just sign guys like Kenny Clark, he's only going to get more expensive, and they'll do that. Jumping into tomorrow's game. Jamal Williams, doubtful, unlikely to play with a shoulder injury. Danny Vitale has a knee injury, and he's listed as doubtful. That leaves Aaron Jones, which is a good thing, and a lot of question marks. The reason I mentioned earlier that they might sign a running back, I don't know. The hard part with that at this point is how do you sign a running back and kind of put him into the offense the night before the game? Unless he knows the offense from a separate stop that he's in, it would be somebody like that. So somebody on the Rams practice squad or somebody on the Titans practice or something like that. That's going to be hard to do. And really what you're doing is kind of holding your breath tomorrow because Aaron Jones is going to play and he's the Packers' best running back, and that's a good thing. And after that is where it gets interesting. If the Packers decide to spell, or if they get a big lead, I guess it's not a problem. But if they decide to spell Aaron Jones, who do they do that with? Because Tyler Irvin has been here for a couple weeks, but he hasn't had a whole lot of reps in the offense. We've started to see him get integrated a little bit more in recent weeks, but not a ton. Dexter Williams has been here all season, but he's essentially been a healthy scratch almost all year. I believe he even got healthy scratched, I think, when Jamal Williams was hurt because Trey Carson played. So I know he was I know he played for the Raiders game because I saw him get a couple carries that day. But other than that, not a whole lot for Dexter Williams this year. So Jason, my question to you is, what do they do in the backfield tomorrow?
Well, so maybe it is Irvin. Maybe you do go with Irvin. Now Trey Carson is out there. So, he's an option. He could end up being a guy that we wake up tomorrow morning and find out that they've signed him and he's in Detroit. And if that's the case, great. It's fine. They just need to get through one game, because my assumption is Jamal Williams and Danny Vitale are being held out of this game because it's not a playoff game. And while it's important, the Packers feel confident enough that they can beat the Lions without them. Green Bay is, and this is gambling, and this does not mean anything necessarily, but Green Bay is a double-digit favorite in this game. So it's not likely, and they're playing a third-string quarterback. Yes, this third-string quarterback, much to Jake's very, very delight, defeated the Ohio State Buckeyes as the quarterback for Purdue.
But it was one of the best nights of my life. It wasn't
beautiful,
but I mean, it was.
And but he's a third stringer. He's a third stringer in the NFL, and that's just the simple fact. So, I think the Packers, just if they cover Kenny Galladay, apparently, because Kenny Galladay could catch, grab 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns with me at quarterback, then I think they'll be fine. So, if this was a playoff game, I'm willing to bet Jamal Williams and Danny Vitale would probably both play. I don't know what the extent of their injury is, and like Jake says all the time, I'm not a doctor. But that's just my particular guess. Is I think they're being smart about it. Will Redmond, another doubtful. He's a role player and more special teams than anything. He also will not play. But outside of that, I think the Packers will be fine. I think they'll be okay. And if it's got to be Tyler Ervin and Aaron Jones, just get through this game. I personally say, look, this is a game where you want to get out to a big lead early. You want to get up 3 possessions. If they go into the second half up 3 possessions, I think they're in great shape. I think they can start resting guys. I don't necessarily know that they wouldn't pull the quarterback at that point and say, hey, look, our defense can hold these clowns, up that much in the second half. That's my personal strategy, is maybe they don't run a bunch. Maybe they try to throw a lot early because they want to get up and build a huge lead. The secondary for the Lions is giving up the most passing yards per game of any other defense in the league.
Jason, we talked about this on Pack-A-Day, and first and foremost, I want to apologize for that because I had mentioned Marvin Jones, and Marvin Jones is on injured reserve, so a brain lapse on my part there. I'd also want to send condolences to Marvin Jones and his family, as heartbreaking news just surfaced that one of his children suddenly passed away today. So our thoughts are with the Jones family. Hope he gets healthy, and honestly, the biggest thing is hoping that his family can heal. Jason, I'm sure you can attest to this as well. As a parent myself, I can't imagine what that is like, and frankly, don't want to. So that said, back to football here. The Packers, you mentioned, might want to throw a lot tomorrow. The Lions have one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. Now, it's not like the Packers offense is able to throw the ball all over the lot, but I kind of agree with you that the goal for this game is, I've said it a million times before. I don't care if they win 14-13. I don't care if they win, 3-0, really. Just as long as they win, the rest is gravy to me. That being said, I do think there is some time or at least an opportunity, I should say, for the Packers to get a lead and start kind of getting some guys rotated in. I think your goal is by the end of this game that Dexter Williams and those guys are getting carries, because that's just what the lead dictates. Guys like Rashawn Gary and Kyler Fackrell are rushing the passer from the edge because the Packers have a lead. So Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith can have a seat. Guys like that, I think that's one of their goals, but ultimately their goal is, Matt LaFleur said it best, they're trying to win a game. It's basically you win one game, you win 2. You win tomorrow, you're in the postseason, you're in the second round. And then you let the chips fall where they may on Sunday night between the Seahawks and the 49ers if the Packers are able to get that number 1 seed to where they'll never have to leave Lambeau Field if they want to go through the post. Well, if they go through the postseason, they'll never have to leave Lambeau Field, whether it's because they're going home or because they're going to the Super Bowl. So I don't think that the Packers are going to take this game lightly. I like what I've heard from the players, that they're focused on this, approaching it as a playoff game. That's a big deal. Because I had mentioned a concern about potentially having a hangover or something like that because of the emotional win that they had on Monday night. But they're saying all the right things. Now it's just a matter of proving it on the field. And against David Blau, they should be able to do that. He's turnover prone. The Packers secondary is opportunistic. The Packers defense as a whole is opportunistic. We should be doing the D train all day long tomorrow. I think Green Bay's defense really has some opportunities to create some plays. That's going to get us into game picks. Jason, I've said a few things. I have no pulse on, no pun intended, but I have no pulse on this team this year, quite clearly. I said they couldn't blow out anybody, so I didn't pick them to blow out the Giants. They blew out the Giants. I picked them to blow the Redskins off the field. It ended up being a one-possession game. I picked them to lose big in Minnesota, and they win by double digits in Minnesota. This time around, it's a third-string quarterback. It's a game that matters much more to Green Bay than it does to Detroit. Matt Patricia's a buffoon. Matt Prater is a bad kicker and a worse person. So Mason Crosby's going to exercise some of his demons, make a field goal or an extra point or two. I think Green Bay wins this game 31-10. And I think that's because it's more important than they are. I think by the end, you're hoping to see Tim Boyle and some guys like that just getting ready for a postseason game at Lambeau Field for the first time since they played the Giants in 2016. And I'm looking forward to it. Jason, I can't imagine you're picking the Lions, but I mean, I've been surprised before.
So they called that an incomplete pass. I'm sorry. We're watching the Clemson-Ohio State game right now. And did they rule that incomplete?
It looks like they did. So that's a positive because that's a touchdown off the board for the Buckeyes.
Well, that also is a completed pass and a fumble. But what do I know? Because nobody knows what a completed pass is. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. I am picking the Packers to win this game. I think it'll end up being something closer to 27-13. It's not going to be a huge blowout, but the Packers, and I think that 13 is going to happen like with a late field goal to make it look like, oh, well, they were only within two possessions. But, as long as the Packers get up, if they score, let me put it to you this way. If the Packers get up 14-0 in this game, it's over. Game is over. I don't care. The Lions don't have anything to play for. And no, they're not going to try to play for, to lay down and tank on purpose, or maybe they will. And frankly, I hope they do. I honestly hope they do. But this could not have worked out better for Green Bay to only have to win one more game to secure home field advantage. And it's a road game, but it happens to be against the Detroit Lions, because I remember back in 2002, we've talked about this several times, when they had a Week 17 game, and I believe had they won that game, they would have actually been the number 1 seed.
Correct.
Unless I'm remembering correctly,
Nope,
because
you're right, because the Eagles lost the day before to the New York Giants, so the Packers had a chance to clinch the number 1 seed, and a team they desperately needed a bye that year because they were so beat up, and that showed up in a big, big way the following week against Atlanta, where Michael Vick is still running.
Yeah, disgusting. Absolutely gross performance against the Jets and Wayne Corbett and whoever else was on that particular team. And so instead of the 1 seed, the Packers dropped all the way to the number 3 seed. If history repeats itself tomorrow, the Packers will be the number 3 seed, but the history is not going to repeat itself. They're not going to allow themselves to lose this game. And it's, for once, it's crazy for me to say, it's not because Aaron Rodgers is coming in with a chip on his shoulder and going to light the world on fire. It's because of the defense. The defense will not allow themselves to lose this game, plain and simple. So whatever scores we want to throw out there is fine. The most important thing for everyone to know is, by the time you're listening to this show, fast forward 24 hours, we'll be enjoying the Packers getting a week off. Whether they're the 1 or the 2 seed will remains to be seen, as far as we know as of recording time right now.
Yeah, so that's one thing to keep in mind is if Green Bay wins and Seattle wins, it'll be Green Bay, New Orleans, Seattle as your top 3 seeds in the NFC. If Green Bay wins and San Francisco wins, it will be San Francisco the 1, Green Bay the 2, and then it'll work its way from there. New Orleans will be the 3 seed. They'll take on Minnesota. Minnesota's locked into the 6 seed. The loser of the NFC West is locked into the 5 seed, and the winner of the NFC least will be your 4 seed. So some interesting stuff going on tomorrow outside of the Packers, obviously, but the Green Bay game is the one that matters the most to us. So Jason, before we get into it, I do want to, since it's kind of a scenario, I guess, my question to you is venue, opponent, whatever, what is the scenario that you would like to see the absolute least for Green Bay in a playoff game? So, for example, my thing is I have zero desire to watch the Packers go and play New Orleans in the Superdome. I think that they could beat New Orleans in Green Bay. I think Drew Brees struggles in the cold. I think Green Bay could try and force him to play to the boundary, and he struggles throwing outside the hashes a little bit, as great as Drew Brees is. I think that Green Bay could give him some trouble in the cold with that defense, with that pass rush, and I think they can slow down Alvin Kamara in their running game as well. So, yes, Jason, I know that Justin Fields just threw a pick, so I understand that look. But I have no desire to play them in the Superdome. I think if they play them in the Dome, I'm not saying Green Bay would get 34-8 like they did when they traveled to San Francisco or get bombed off the field like that. I don't think that Green Bay would be able to win a game in New Orleans. I think they could win. I give them a better chance at winning in San Francisco or something like that. But is that the scenario you desire the least? What team do you want to see? What's your worst case scenario, I guess I should say?
Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit and just say my worst case scenario is the Packers have to go on the road at all. I don't want to have to go to Seattle, San Francisco, or New Orleans. I don't want to have to play in either of those buildings. If it's Seattle, it's an absolute nightmare. I may not even watch the game. I may just wait until I know the final result and then go back and watch it afterwards because I can't do it anymore. I just can't. I can't do it anymore. They haven't won in that complete crap box since 2008, and that was way, way, way too long ago.
They would win there if they played there this year. I'm just putting that out there.
You can put that out there because you also told me that they were going to win there when they played in the NFC Championship game back in 2014, and they should have. You were right. You were correct. You were not wrong.
Yeah, one of 29 things got in the way.
Yeah. Okay. If I have to pick one thing, honestly, I still say playing at Seattle might be the worst case scenario. I mean, they've already faced San Francisco. I give them a chance to perform better than they did the first time, even though the matchup isn't great, and San Francisco just generates so much pressure easily up front without sending extra guys. And the Packers don't have the wide receivers to take advantage of or to get open against full coverage like that. So that's the problem that you run into with San Francisco. The New Orleans problem is that the Packers have played like absolute dog shit every time they've stepped into that building. And the last time they won there was 1995. And I'm not joking. I literally think it was 1995. So it's not. That's why I say I don't want the Packers to have to travel. I am absolutely throwing every prayer, wish, 11-11, all the things that the stars can continue to align one more week, because they have aligned like there is no tomorrow this season. Yep. And we've seen teams that were destined before. The 2003 Packers, there wasn't a doubt in my mind that team was going to be playing for a chance to go to the Super Bowl. And Donovan McNabb and Freddie Mitchell ripped our hearts out. Yep. So Donovan McNabb and Freddie Mitchell started to rip our hearts out. Brett Favre actually finished ripping it out. If everyone remembers 4th and 26, nobody remembers, and I quote, the bag of kittens that Brett Favre threw up.
Rebuttal. Mike Sherman started to rip our heart out because it was 4th and 1.
You're right.
He punted.
With one of the best, if you want to talk about, okay, let's just digress for a sec here, Jay, because we're already there. If you want to talk about a decision that was made in the moment with a player based on how that player was performing that season, okay, so I'm throwing all the caveats. I'm not saying Ahman Green is the best running back of all time. I'm not saying he was even the best running back that season, because Jamal Lewis actually ended up over 2,000 yards that season. But if you consider the decision that was made not to use a player that was that effective in that moment, that may be one of the top 5 worst decisions ever made all time in the history of this 100-year league called the NFL. And no, I'm not joking.
Yeah, and it might be towards the very top of the Green Bay Packers, because if you remember, not just did they have Ahman Green, but they had Mike Wall and Chad Clifton and Mike Flanagan and Marco Rivera, dudes, just road graders on that offensive line. Go for it, 100%. And you know what? The reason they didn't go for it is because they had early in the game, it was 4th and 1, and Ahman Green tripped over one of his guards on his way to the end zone, and it lost the Packers points. They could have gone up 17-0. Instead, they tried to go up 21-0, and I'm convinced to this day Mike Sherman was scared from that first instance of going for it on 4th and goal. But nonetheless, speaking of those guys, so we like Green Bay to win tomorrow. Something else I wanted to discuss was the NFL did their all 100 team, and the Packers, obviously, as you guys can see behind me here, they have 3 quarterbacks in that photo right there that could have easily made the team, and that is Bart Starr, Brett Favre, and Aaron Rodgers, only one of which made the list, and it was Brett Favre. So, Jason, here's my question, and we have about 5 minutes or so here. One of them, 2 of them, 3 of them, how many guys should have made that list of that group above me they picked 10 quarterbacks. So of that list above, how many guys would you have picked for the list?
One.
Yeah.
One guy, because one guy is still playing and his story is not done. Okay. And so Aaron Rodgers is not that guy. So you're down to Bart Starr and Brett Favre. So, I mean, they gave it to Brett Favre and they gave it to the wrong guy. I mean, you're talking about, and this isn't, me being an old guy or being a throwback or anything like that. Bart Starr absolutely was revolutionary playing in the offense that he did at that time. The passing game was still not crazy, but he made it crazy. He called his own plays. He won 2 championships. He was on 2 championship winning teams.
He won 5 I'm not a QB championships. 2
not a QB wins 2 Super Bowls. Yeah. And I'm trying to stay modern era here because people for some reason just want to dismiss anything that happened before they were born. Bart Starr is absolutely 100. And this is also not just because, we lost him this year and I'm feeling nostalgic and I'm a prisoner of the moment. No. It's because Bart Starr belongs on that list. Brett Favre was fantastic. He was wonderful. The moments that he gave us, the emotion, he gave us more. Aaron Rodgers has given us a lot of moments and probably more total moments. Brett Favre gave us more emotional moments than I've ever seen any particular single player give me in my lifetime, and I'm very grateful for it. Bart Starr, hands down, should have been on the list. He's not. To me, they got it wrong.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that something that needs to be pointed out is I think there's a lot of people that only remember late era Favre, post 2000s Favre, where he had obviously the one great year in Minnesota, he had a great year in Green Bay his last year here, and some other stuff. And Favre's an all-time great, one of the best quarterbacks that I've ever seen play, no doubt about that. But that being said, I agree with you. I think that there's no question. My thought on the list being hypocritical is that Joe Montana and Tom Brady made that list basically because of their winning accomplishments, if you will. Statistically, well, Brady a little more so, but statistically, talent-wise, those guys aren't going to be in the same breath as guys like Peyton Manning, or they don't have the arm strength of Dan Marino or guys like that. But they got on the list because they were on teams that won a lot of games. Bart Starr was on a team that won 5 championships, and he's the highest rated postseason passer in the history of the sport. There is no question to me. If you ask me, everybody talks about who's the GOAT, and Tom Brady's the GOAT, and that's great that people think that. I don't. If you ask me who the best quarterback ever is, and I'm going to duck, and I'm sure some idiot Boston fan will find this, but Peyton Manning is the greatest quarterback I have ever seen. I don't think that there's any question. He mastered the position like nobody ever had. And if I want to give after that, it's Bart Starr. And because he was money when it counted, he was phenomenal. I know he played around a bunch of Hall of Famers, and that kind of gets pointed out to his detriment. But if you ask those players to a man, that's the guy that made that engine go.
I've never understood why you penalize a team for being smart and drafting great play, because it's 11 guys. Here's the thing. In football, whoever it was, because I'm sure you saw the same tweet, might have been Andrew Brandt. There's 22 guys on a football team that play, but only half of them are on the field at any one given time. It's not like basketball where the 5 guys are out there playing offense and defense. So it is a team sport. There isn't a
team
single
sport. Yep.
the ultimate team sport, and that's why you can this whole you had Hall of Famers, so it was easy. That's kind of how it works.
Right.
But by the way, Hall of Famers or not, Bart Starr, if you watch him and you listen to him, the Ice Bowl, that quarterback sneak was a microcosm because they ran that play, I think, 3 times, right? At least twice.
Yeah,
it was like I can do it. I can make this thing happen. Listen, there was a great block thrown in front of him. Bart Starr had to get his ass into the end zone, and he did it on a very, very not ideal Lambeau Field playing surface.
That's my biggest thing too. Is you talk 100 years in this league, perhaps the most iconic play in the history of the sport is the quarterback sneak in the Ice Bowl, and the quarterback in there is disrespected on lists like this constantly, and it doesn't make any sense to me. It never will, but that's okay. That's fine. Bart Starr deserves to be on this list, in my opinion. I know I've kind of reversed some of my thoughts on this, but in terms of the Packers franchise, in my opinion, it's Bart Starr is number 1, Aaron Rodgers is number 2, and Brett Favre is number 3. And honestly, I think you're splitting hairs with a lot of those things, but there isn't a big game that Bart Starr played poorly in. There isn't a big moment that he shied away from, and he was good in a lot of the other games too. It's not just some nostalgia type stuff. He's one of the all-time greats, and he should have made that list. He's one of the best quarterbacks ever, and gets disrespected because of it. So he absolutely deserved to be on that list, and I'm not giving him extra credit because he passed away, which I do think does tend to happen sometimes. So that is our thought on that list. The big thing is tomorrow, Green Bay plays Detroit with a chance for a first-round bye, and that will do it for this show. So check out our show on YouTube. It's at Pulse of the Pack. The one with the logo, not the one with a picture of Aaron Rodgers. For some reason, I can't get YouTube to get rid of that channel, even though I am the owner of it. So that is what it is. Check out the show on Twitter. It's at Packer Pulse. You can follow Jason. He's at Jason Perone. And you can follow me. I am at Jacob Westendorf. Sunday, big day, chance to get a first-round bye. Thanks to everyone for listening and watching. And, of course, as always, go Pack Go.